Mila had a crush on Andrew, who was in the 6th grade and 2 years her senior. Naturally, he didn't give his secret admirer the time of day. It wasn't until he reached the final grade that he took notice of Mila, who had blossomed over the summer. Her joy knew no bounds as her dreams started to take shape. They nurtured a gentle and precious relationship throughout their university days. However, they weren't accepted into the same college. Andrew secured admission, while Mila couldn't qualify for a scholarship and her parents couldn't afford the tuition fees. On the day they celebrated their graduation, Andrew, visibly nervous and stammering from excitement, presented Mila with a ring. Overflowing with happiness, she naturally said yes. The same girl who once wept over unrequited love for this boy now beamed with joy as he held her hand, tears of joy glistening in his eyes. She felt like bursting with laughter. The first significant hurdle in their marriage emerged during the 3rd year. It began with a failed attempt to conceive, leading to Mila's hospitalization and subsequent depression. She grew distant from Andrew, and their communication dwindled, although he earnestly tried to aid her in overcoming their ordeal. For nearly a year, they lived like strangers, sharing the same bed but miles apart emotionally. The couple was like exposed wires. Touch them, and you'd regret it. Fear gnawed at both, making a return to normalcy seem impossible. A year hence, they found themselves rediscovering one another. Andrew asked his wife out on dates. They engaged in lively conversations, sipped wine, savored delectable cuisine, roamed through hibitions and museums, and attended theater performances. A glimmer of hope emerged, suggesting all was not lost. On February 23rd, Mila handed him a box containing a pregnancy test. Fast forward 9 months, and Andrew cradled tiny Hannah, a spitting image of her mother, right down to the little defiant nose. When he gazed at his daughter, joy flooded his heart. They had weathered the storm and emerged stronger, with Hannah as the embodiment of their resilience. Andrew let his guard down, convinced that the worst was behind them. A brighter future seemed to loom ahead. He never imagined they would face another separation. Little did he know the future held different plans. To catch a break from endless diapers and baby clothes and to escape the monotony of maternity leave, Mila began stepping out with her friends. Initially, her outings were sporadic, just a couple of times a month to unwind. But as Hannah grew older, Mila's nights out became increasingly frequent. Andrew, striving to be an understanding husband, tried to cope with her absences. He always supported his spouse and never refused her need for rest, but it was starting to feel excessive to him. "Mila, do you know what time it is? Why do I have to be on guard when you arrive home?" the husband complained as his wife returned, barely able to stand at 6 o'clock in the morning and barely able to speak. "I can handle it. I earn," Mila retorted, and he couldn't blame his wife. She did go out to work, although not every day. The baby was taken care of by the grandmother during this time. Occasionally, Mila took advantage of this and, pretending she was called in for work, slipped away somewhere. They would meet up with a friend at a cafe, go to the movies, or sometimes just wander around the mall to avoid staying at home. Mila herself didn't realize when exactly she turned away from motherhood. She had no desire to spend time with her daughter. She craved freedom. She regretted not leaving her husband during that terrible year. But now it seemed foolish to leave. Her daughter needed a father, and Mila didn't want to deprive her of that. It was during this time that she met a man at a club. He was slightly older, good-looking, wealthy, and confident. Whenever David was around, Mila's legs trembled under his gaze. She would absurdly burst into laughter and flirt with him shamelessly. Naturally, she couldn't hide her husband-child, but she lied about her deteriorating relationship with Andrew, claiming they were on the brink of divorce and that he was threatening to sue her for custody of their daughter. Mila no longer loved her husband Andrew from a distance, and she felt guilty every time she thought of him. Interestingly, their connection was advantageous for her, as their relationship was progressing rapidly. However, Mila couldn't admit that she was in love with David. She simply enjoyed his company and felt comfortable around him. He spoiled her with gifts, took her out to fancy restaurants, and when she was with him, it felt like she was living a whole new, liberating life. Unfortunately, at home, there was a crying child waiting for her and a husband who had grown tired of her. Andrew began to notice that his wife had acquired new, often expensive things. Even considering her salary, she couldn't possibly afford them, and he couldn't comprehend where they were all coming from. Mila lied, claiming she borrowed clothing from a friend for a short time or found a new bracelet for a steal. Initially, her husband believed her, but day by day his trust dwindled, until one fateful day when it completely tinguished, leading to countless arguments. The couple realized that their marriage was heading towards divorce, yet neither of them could summon the courage to take the first step and put an end to it. Andrew fought desperately to hold on to his beloved. He couldn't fathom how the devoted wife and caring mother had transformed into a woman who had lost interest in her child and no longer treated her spouse with affection. Andrew confided in his mother, sharing every detail with her. The wise old woman listened attentively, nodding in understanding and occasionally heaving gentle sighs. "You should have parted back then. You can't fix what's broken," she murmured softly. "But we wouldn't have held it all together, and we wouldn't have had a family," Andrew replied with a heavy heart. His daughter Hannah was the shining light in his life. He cherished the young girl with all his might, unable to imagine his world without her. For Hannah's sake, he was willing to go to any lengths. One fateful day, as Andrew returned from work, he parked his car and made his way toward the entrance. That's when he noticed a man sitting on a bench nearby. As soon as the stranger saw Andrew, he rose to his feet and purposely blocked his path. Towering over Andrew, he gave off an ominous vibe, half a head taller. "What do you want?" Andrew asked, striving to maintain his composure. "Well, I'll tell you right now," the stranger responded, his tone eerily calm. "Leave her be." Andrew was taken aback by what he heard. "What do you mean, leave her? She's my wife. We have a family. I know all about your family. She's told me everything." The stranger loomed over Andrew, casting a menacing glare. Determined to understand the situation, Andrew urged the stranger to explain why he thought Mila was unhappy with her husband, and how he even knew her in the first place. It turned out that the mysterious individual was David, to whom Mila had once again spun stories about her oppressive husband, someone who refused to grant her a divorce and was attempting to take away their daughter. Andrew absorbed everything David was saying with wide-eyed incredulity. The thought of taking Hannah away, being labeled a tyrant who withheld money and berated his for every dime, sent him into fits of laughter. The absurdity of it all seemed like something out of a bad sitcom, and he could hardly believe it was happening to him. Seeing Andrew's reaction, the other man realized something was amiss. Andrew suggested they all talk it over together, gesturing for David to come inside. "Let her say this to my face," he said, a bittersweet smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. When Andrew and David stepped inside the apartment, Mila was struck. Her breath hitched in her throat as her eyes darted from one man to the other. The demand for an explanation hung in the air, but the gravity of the situation spoke volumes already. For Andrew, it was like a burden had been lifted. The endless arguments and her habit of storming out had been draining him more than he realized. Now, with newfound clarity, he resolved to divorce her, dismissing the pretense of relocating to patch things up. Mila ultimately left her daughter with Andrew. He didn't object. In fact, he was relieved and delighted by the prospect of raising his little. Andrew felt optimistic about their future, envisioning a life brimming with joyous moments. Mila's calls grew increasingly sporadic, and Hannah's visits became rare. Surprisingly, the young girl rarely inquired about her mother. He knew that his had gone to the capital in pursuit of greatness, and found another man there with whom she now shared her life. Andrew sincerely hoped that Mila would find joy, and maybe, just maybe, start a new life with someone else. He didn't feel bitterness toward her. After all, everything that happens for a reason. Cheating Secrets podcasts like me